Howdy, I'm Big Al, and today we're going to talk about brisket. But first, this butcher block was in my grandfather's general store in the early 1800s, and we're still using it today. Let me tell you how to pick a brisket. Most briskets today are cut. Most of the fat has been taken off. As you can see from this side, there is fat pockets, but the butcher completely cleans it up. In the old days, you could buy a brisket that was completely covered in fat on both sides. The reason I picked this brisket is because it has a very thick fat cap. Now you have to have at least one side of the brisket with this fat cap on it. That's what makes it tender. Don't cut it off, let it stay on there. This is a 12-pound brisket, so it is going to take a minimum of 12 hours to cook. Really, what you need to add is at 225 degrees, this needs to go 1 pound per hour. So if it's a 12-pound brisket, it's going to take 12 hours. If you start opening the door, you need to add time. I always say low and slow and keep the dough closed. Now we're going to put the seasoning or the rub onto the brisket. Basically what we're doing is just completely covering the brisket with the rub. It's very important not to leave any part exposed. Now some people like to push it in. If you don't like that technique, just put it on there. It'll be all right. With the salt that is in the rub, and consequently, if you're not using salt in your rubs, you're not going to get the flavor down into the meat. The salt actually opens up the pores of the meat, which allows the rest of the seasoning to go into the brisket. We put it on that side, we turn it over. We use generous amounts. Once again, we want to make sure that we cover every part. When you have all the rub on, let it sit for 24 hours. One of the biggest mistakes that people make when they do a brisket is they pull it right out of the refrigerator and they put it right on the smoker. The reason for that is that if you stick it right on the smoker, you're going to have to add time to it for it to come up and start actually cooking. This brisket is ready to go, but one thing I want to remind you is do not use a sharp object on the brisket. Every time you put a hole in this brisket, you release the juices. So use a big spatula. That's the way to go for any type of meat. For more tips and information and to buy my rubs, go to Big Al's Texas Rubs at Artizone.com.